Hello and welcome to Freedom Watch, your daily dose of raw liberty, streaming online at foxnews.com. I'm your host, Judge Andrew Napolitano, here defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. A piece in this past weekend's Wall Street Journal entitled "George Shultz on the Drug War" debates the effectiveness of the war on drugs, not just today, but back when it actually began under President Ronald Reagan, when George Shultz was the Secretary of State. Doubts on the so-called drug war have been known by politicians for decades and witnessed by all of us. The ease of access to these products, the harmless nature of their use, their popularity among the middle class are all further evidence, a new report suggests, that mom-and-pop marijuana farmers here in the U.S. may actually be a bigger threat to Mexican drug cartels than the federal government is. And many states have authorized the moms and pops to grow all the marijuana they can for medicinal use. Joining me now is Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future for Freedom Foundation. Jake, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
It's nice to be back, Judge. Thank you.
Why are harmless recreational drugs even against the law to begin with?
Well, it's part of this paternalistic mindset that individuals belong to the state, belong to the collective. That they're not permitted to pursue happiness in their own way, even if it's in a way that other people disapprove of. It's this notion that we have to control you for your own good and for the good of society. And we see what the results are. This is a failed war. It's been going on for some 40 years. Richard Nixon declared it. I grew up on the border. I've seen the way it's operated on the border with all the violence, the collateral damage. It's time to end this thing, Judge, and there's only one way to end it, and that's the way we ended it with Prohibition. Repeal it.
Is there something in our culture, Jake, some sort of Victorian genetic gene in the American culture that even though we know these things are going on, and even though there are some states that just won't prosecute the private use of it, we have to put up the pretense that we're using the government to stop people from doing things to themselves because we don't like it, because it doesn't look good in the eyes of our grandparents or our parents?
Well, I think it's a split in the American psyche where there's this long tradition that exists within the American people of a love of liberty, a love of individualism, a love of free markets, versus this love of statism, of having the government take care of us, of watching over us and caring for us. I think it's that split that has gone on in the 200 and some odd years of this country's history.
Last week, I did an interview with Paul Armentano from NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, and I made it very, very clear to him that in my own view, these laws are unconstitutional, that the government is wasting its time and wasting our money and wasting human life by the manner in which it enforces these laws. And the email response that I received was overwhelming, 99-1 in favor of it. Is it controversial for people in the public eye to come out in favor of the legalization of the private use of recreational drugs?
Well, you know, when I was bringing this up 20 years ago on radio talk shows or whatever, I could light up the phone calls. People were just shocked over the possibility that drugs could be legalized. 20 years later, it is now a legitimate position. Milton Friedman, the Nobel laureate economist, was saying this back in the 70s, that this is going to be a failed war, a destructive war, an immoral war. 20 years later, I think people are coming to that realization. I mean, what do the drug warriors have left after 20, 30 years? All they have is their good intentions, and that's not enough. They have made the situation worse. They've ruined things on the border. When I was a kid, we used to go into Nuevo Laredo and to the clubs there and the restaurants and the marketplace. nobody goes across anymore because of the gang war, the drug war violence, and this is all because of prohibition. Not because of drugs, but because of drug war prohibition.
All right, so what we currently have now is about 23 or 24 states where marijuana is lawful for medicinal purposes. In some of those states, the government sort of looks the other way when marijuana is used for recreational purposes. And we have a federal government, even though it continues to prosecute some people who were indicted under the Bush administration, says it won't indict people for growing or distributing marijuana for medicinal purposes as long as it's done pursuant to state law. Is there a change in thinking amongst the ruling class, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, liberals or conservatives, statists or libertarians, that it's time to devote governmental resources elsewhere?
I think so. I mean, they're seeing the tide of public opinion. They know that there's police officers are calling for drug legalization, federal judges, prosecutors, lawyers. They see opinion makers saying that this is the only solution. And we have argued for 30 years now, Judge, that the free market would put these drug dealers and drug cartels out of business instantaneously. And the article to which you're referring, where the private sector is having these marijuana farms, is proving that. These cartels are having a difficult time competing against these legitimate marijuana farms, which leads us to believe that if you legalize the whole market, these drug gangs and cartels would go out of business overnight.
Jake Hornberger from the Future of Freedom Foundation, thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.